But I like to talk about surrealness instead of denial. The surrealness is about that the whole entire world looks completely different and the same all at the same time, and how bizarre and weird that is.
This surreal experience is just one dimension of grief we explore today on Beyond the Window. Clinician Isabelle Pilato and grief specialist Debi Jenkins Frankle examine how loss transforms us, from its physical impacts to its hidden emotional layers. They discuss navigating complex relationships with grief, finding meaningful ways to process it, and honoring its place in our lives. This is Beyond the Window.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Window podcast. My name is Isabelle. I'm a clinician here at La Ventana, and I am sitting with the most amazing grief legend. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Debi Jenkins Frankle, and I'm totally a grief nerd. I've been a therapist. My gosh, I've been licensed 30 years this year,
wow,
which is kind of crazy. And I started specializing. I started noticing grief. Oh my gosh, 30. How long has it been? 33 years ago. Actually, right after my mom died. It was my last semester in grad school. And she was diagnosed with liver cancer and died almost 2 weeks later. And that completely turned my whole entire world upside down and inside out, and all the subsequent losses and changes in my own family. Mm-hmm. And I was working in a psych hospital. I worked in psych hospitals for 15 years before I escaped. I actually even met my husband in a locked psych unit. We both had keys. I worked the day shift. He worked the night shift, the evening shift. But there's so much grief that we don't recognize as grief. You know, it looks like depression, or it exacerbates depression. Mm-hmm. It looks like anxiety because fear is a primary emotion in grief. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get through this? What am I going to do? How am I going to get my kids through this? What's going to happen? And sometimes it's underneath psychosis, like the woman at the psych hospital that I went in to go do her psych history. She was in her mid-70s. I will never forget this. This was, oh my gosh, this was literally, I think that was more than 35 years ago. And she was psychotic, thought that she was 4 years old. And she had different episodes a few times in her life. And I was able to reach one of her brothers who had told me that when she was 5, their mom died. And this was in the 1920s, I think. And so all the kids got sent to orphanages. And so her 4 brothers all got to go to one orphanage together. And she was a girl, and so she had to go to this other orphanage by herself.
Yeah.
Which I was like, well, then her believing that she was 4 years old makes so much sense. So it's psychosis, but there's grief, there's loss, always underneath, you know, what people bring to us in our offices, in our treatment programs. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And so I just started seeing grief kind of from a really, really different perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah. Grief is one of the most common things in life.
Yes.
And continues to be one of the least common things talked about.
I know.
Which is crazy. Incredible.
I know.
Right? So it's this very oppositional way of you know, here's this thing that happens to all of us over our lifetime, whether or not it even happens and develops into psychosis, develops into addiction, develops into anxiety, depression. It's still this, we can't talk about it, we can't go there, painful subject.
Right.
And so...
Because we learn in so many different ways, subtly and not so subtly, that we don't go there. Just be happy. In time, it'll just get better. And you're just being too sensitive and you just need to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They wouldn't want you to feel this way. Right?
Exactly.
They're in a better place.
Right. And so many of those comments are meant from well-meaning people.
Absolutely.
They come from that. And so we start thinking, people come in our offices, they come in your program, thinking there's something wrong with them. I remember talking to a class years ago, and this guy had said his mom had died when he was in his teens. And we were talking about what is helpful, what's not helpful. And he said, I don't know, maybe there's something wrong with me. Literally said, maybe there's something wrong with me, because the most helpful thing that anybody has said to me, he said, all these people were coming up to me and saying, oh, wow, I just heard about your mom. I'm so sorry. He was like, I didn't understand why they were apologizing. Sometimes an apology is helpful, sometimes not. However, he said, what was really the thing that was most helpful is this kid that came up to me. I didn't even know him. He came up to me and said, I just heard about your mom. That is so fucked. And he said that, we talked about, that was really truthful, okay? And that carries, that really helps, is it would be much better if people will come up to a griever and say, I have no idea what to say, rather than, they're in a better place. Or, I remember the charge nurse said that to me when I went up and told them that my dad had died. He was at the hospital and we were just waiting. And she said, oh, he's in a better place. And I said, you know what, actually, I'm here all by myself. And I could actually just use a hug. And I loved her reaction. She was like, oh, like I hadn't thought about that. She was, oh, well, okay.
Right.
I said, great, that's what I need. But most grievers don't think about that. They're like, oh, okay.
Right.
And they take that in, or they take it in and they ignore it, but they don't, it hurts and it's distancing, or we get advice. You should really, get busy and go take an extra course, especially while your brain is not thinking well.
Yeah. Distract.
Exactly.
Throw yourself into work. Well, if I just stay really busy,
right,
then I won't have to think about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
One of my favorite things to talk about in my grief group is it's rarely a response from anyone that's going to make you feel better, even though putting that in air quotes of that's not necessarily end goal with grief. No. It's connection. Right?
Exactly.
It's connecting. And I love your story of it's fucked. It is. Grief is fucked.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's one of the most painful,
messy.
hurtful, messy.
Yeah.
It causes this ripple effect, all these secondary losses.
Yeah.
And so there's not this magical answer you can tell someone when they're grieving, this magical statement.
Exactly.
It's connection. It's seeing someone. It's having that empathy for someone.
Yeah.
And that might help them in that moment. And that's all, that's that glimmer.
Exactly.
That hope, that faith that it's okay.
To feel seen.
Absolutely.
To feel heard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not judged.
And I'm so glad we get to talk about all of that today.
Me too.
I wanted to ask before we jump too far in, what are you working on these days and what do you do with your day?
Well, this is why I'm a grief nerd, is because I started actually a consultation group.
Nice.
Oh my gosh, I think it was in 1900. It was in 2012 because I'm really old. And I'm fine with being really old. I've earned every wrinkle and gray hair that I have.
Hell yeah.
So in 2012, I had decided to start doing a consultation group in person at my office in Calabasas. And because I wanted to know, what are other clinicians doing about grief? Only to quickly figure out everybody going, "Oh no, what are you doing?" And I don't, I don't subscribe to the 5 stages. But what happened was that it grew, and I just picked like a different subject every month so that we had something to focus on that was grief related, which has grown into, in 2018, I have a whole bunch of courses. I have a course that I just finished online, that's actually, people can get, therapists can get, it's a self-paced, interactive course on estrangement, because estrangement grief is real, and there's so many families that are so fractured for so many reasons. There was a study that was done November of last year, right after the elections, that indicated 60% of estrangement was getting fueled by political differences in families.
Wow.
Yeah.
In families.
And estrangement is something that happens on a continuum. There's a research that I had found out about this continuum of the relationship distance that is about quantity and quality, and there's a whole lot of different things on that continuum. But so that's one course, and then I just started last Friday. I started a monthly consultation group on writing, using writing as a grief tool, and that's one of my main tools that we use at our center, which is really, really cool. Yeah. So yeah. And then, yeah, I could go on and on and on with all my courses. Go to privatepracticegrief.com and you'll see what I'm offering these days. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. You're doing such amazing work.
Yeah.
And I would echo, clinicians, we don't get trained in grief or what to do with grief.
Right.
And so sometimes there's this panic that comes up when it's, there's a client that is experiencing grief, and it's, what do I do with that?
Right.
What am I supposed to do with that?
Right.
And the stages of grief is what we learn, right? Which is quickly debunked when you actually look into and research. And these stages aren't necessarily a roadmap that I need to lead someone through, but rather experiences and feelings.
Exactly.
And so there's, sometimes this helplessness, definitely from like a clinical perspective. If you don't know what to do with grief, of like, how do I help a client? Right. Or have I like worked through my own grief?
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Because that comes up too. And that's a fear for a lot of clinicians of, what if I start crying? And so, have you ever sat with your client and our clients and your heart is moved? Yeah. Okay. And you might get a little teary.
Yeah.
That happens. And I say, don't wipe the tear away. Okay. Now, if you feel like you're about to hit a gusher, well, then that's a good indication of, you know what? You might have some of your own grief coming up, and, do make sure that you take care of yourself and do some continued grief work. I tell people, at our center, we ask people, to do a lot of grief work, and with the stipulation of, hey, look, you know what? We're not going to ask you to do anything that we haven't done ourselves, or that I know that I have to continue doing, because otherwise I'm not able to really be present. And I have to say, I hate doing this work myself. I say the F word a lot when I have to do it myself, but I also know that I can't not do it. Yeah. And I'm always surprised of how much, of how heavy the grief is. If you look at the root word, one of the root words of grief, which is gref, which is a French word, it means heaviness. It also means injustice, which just makes so much sense, because it almost always feels unfair.
Yeah. And, grief on this continuum, it's not, right? If I were to look back at if when I'm sitting with a client and we can kind of see, okay, here's like a trauma experience, right? And okay, let's, work through healing. Let's work through these like traumatic experiences where grief is constantly coming up in life. And it's this continued process.
Yeah.
Because I agree, it's the worst part of anybody's life to look at, whatever type of loss it is. And hopefully we can talk about some of those types of losses too.
Yeah.
It's we're constantly in grief because loss is defined as any type of change that occurs in life, right?
Exactly.
Change is constant.
Exactly.
Therefore, grief is constant.
Right. And we have, and grief looks different at different times as well.
Yeah. I was at a wedding this past weekend for my college roommate, right? And close friend. And, while I was there, I was crying tears of joy, right? It's beautiful. It's such a life-altering event. And I was driving home from the wedding and I had this twinge of sadness. And I realized, there's grief, right? And it doesn't mean I'm not happy for her. Doesn't mean, that this wasn't a joyous event. It was, this is like a change in my life. This is a change in her life. This is we're aging. We're like getting to different parts of our life. And I had to really, be careful to not be like, you can't be sad about that. That's like such a happy event for her. I'm allowed to be sad. I'm allowed to take this dialectical view of, I'm allowed to say like, this is a life stage happening right in front of my face. And I'm growing older and she's growing older and all my friends are growing older. Right, which is a loss and grief in itself. And how do I allow both to exist in my head? Because I think going back to grief is so common, yet we try to repress it all the time. And deny its existence. Instead of learning how to be open and let ourselves feel everything that comes with it, which is so wonderful to hear you say we have all of these writing tools because writing is one of the most powerful ways to connect with all of those emotions.
There is something that happens within our system that knows it's okay, it's been recorded. Sometimes I'll use a very simplistic example of writing a grocery list before you go to the grocery store. If I don't write that list, then I'm still kind of going, wait a minute, what did I need? Did I need lemons and garlic and olive oil? And wait, did I put that down or not? But I know if it's on a list, it's okay. I don't have to remember it. Okay, so that's really, really, really super simplistic. And yet in this system, in being able to use writing in different ways, we externalize our grief also, but we're able to get a different perspective on it.
Wow. What are some other tools that, through your years of working with clients and doing all of this research, what are some other tools that you found have been really helpful?
I'll talk a little bit about my framework. So my framework is more of I look at unfinished business, and frankly, you can't be in any type of relationship, even with yourself, without having unfinished business. And so I look at regrets of what's the stuff that we wish we had done differently, what's the stuff that we wish the other person could have done differently. What's the hurts, what's the resentments, that built up in the relationship. And then I also look at the appreciations and or the gratitude and that perhaps didn't get expressed or didn't even get realized until after the relationship has changed or is over.
Yeah.
And so if I listen for that, then the regrets come out as guilt. And a lot of times that guilt is not always about we had malicious intent to harm the other person. A lot of times guilt is about the stuff that we wish we had been able to do differently, knowing what we know now.
Hindsight bias.
And so I think being able to dive deeper into those three components really help. But I think also before we even get there is that we do timeline maps. Yeah, and I loved. Have you started doing timeline maps?
Yes, we have.
Isabelle, I'm so excited.
They're always so good.
Awesome.
So good.
Awesome. So yeah, we just do a simple line across the paper. That's it. Or if you're doing it online, then we use whiteboard usually. And just being able to identify different types of losses, changes, significant events, even, positive or negative.
Yes.
And being able to lay it out is really cool. I get so excited. I have awesome, my husband and I, we have great staff. We have 5 of the most amazing grief-informed therapists, traumatic grief-informed therapists. Wow. And I love that when they come to us and they, might have clients that follow them and they'll say, oh my gosh, now I'm doing this timeline with these clients that I had for the year before. And holy moly, we didn't even touch any of this stuff. I'm like, I know, isn't that cool? You see it out on paper. Yeah. So on my way over here, I had sent you, I was very excited. I put together a type of losses that contribute. So you want to go over it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead. I sent it over to you.
Yeah. So these are types of losses that, Debbie wonderfully drafted up that occur very commonly and repeatedly in a lifetime that can really contribute or exasperate, right? Any type of maladaptive coping skills.
Exactly.
Mental health issues, symptoms, right? Grief is one of those underlying causes of a lot of different symptomologies, addictive type behaviors, whether it is your traditional substance use addiction, behavioral addictions.
Right.
And so we wanted to take some time to talk about, what types of losses. Do you want to run through the list? Do you want to just go by category? What do you want to do?
Here's what I think, and this is something to do. And so we use it as an assessment, but it's also a really cool tool.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, I think about relational or attachment losses, such as, the death of a loved one, abandonment by caregivers in childhood, divorce. And divorce is definitely much more recognized now as a grieving event than it used to be. Estrangement is a really, really big one. And again, these are a lot take into account non-living, what we call non-death losses. Loss of a mentor, sponsor or support, loss of custody or contact with children. So those are just a few. I have actually a whole other list of losses that I have on our website at Calabasas Counseling or privatepracticegrief.com. But if you look at just the relational losses and lay that out, now look at loss of safety and stability. Okay. And I think actually, with loss of safety, I always listened for what are the loss of safety and trust experiences, and what impact did that have on the person? And in doing that line, you can kind of help them expand it. It's either like, was that a little thing? Was that a big thing? Was that not acknowledged, but you later realized that was a big deal?
Internally, I could say, oh, that was big. Right. But I didn't have the space or the time or the people or the support to talk about it.
And so one of those questions that I think is really important is also to ask in doing this is, did you have anyone to talk to about that? Because we're listening for how isolated have they been? Yeah.
With attachment and that I think goes back to family dynamics too, right? Of usually people's first experiences of loss is in the family system, right? Whether it's, grandparent or older family member.
Or a pet.
Absolutely. or, maybe someone closer in the family, right? Or there's a divorce or a breakup or, sibling estrangement, anything like that. We look at, there's also this attachment wound forming at the same time.
Exactly.
Right? There's this, what if I form the belief that people are always going to leave?
Exactly.
Right? Or people are always going to abandon me.
Right.
And if I experience a loss 20, 30 years down the line, I'm not only thinking about, I have this loss that's impacting me now. It's now all of those attachment wounds are being activated.
Exactly.
And so it's something that's huge that we have to look at relationally.
Exactly.
What are my interpersonal beliefs? How are they maybe informed by grief and loss in my life too?
Absolutely.
And that emotional safety, right? Emotional safety and family dynamics.
Yeah.
In our program, we always go back to, did I have comfort? Did I experience, space where I could talk about anything apart from just grief? Was I allowed to talk about hurt? Was I allowed to talk about my fear, right? Or did I have to shove everything down?
Right.
That's also going to inform the way I speak about those losses, that really impactful event that grief becomes later in my life.
Exactly.
And so if I learn that it's not emotionally safe to talk about these things,
then
I'm not going to talk about it.
Then you'll figure out ways, we will figure out ways to protect ourselves. Yeah.
And those unfortunately turn usually into those maladaptive coping skills.
Absolutely.
Right? Isolation.
That's right.
Repression.
I became a professional caregiver at 7 when my sister died.
Wow.
And she was an infant. She was only 4 days old. And yet that impacted our whole entire family in ways that I, it wasn't until, just probably 10, 20 years ago, that we're like, wow, holy moly, that impacted everybody.
Everything.
Yeah. And so I took more care of my mom. And my mom ended up over the years drinking more. And that was why she died of liver failure. And so you have whole systems that are just trying to protect each other. A lot of times it comes out of, I just want to protect you, and yet it can be very harmful if we don't know how to be able to acknowledge and soothe and listen to each other.
Yeah. And how are we supposed to learn to soothe, learn to co-regulate, learn to deal with the unimaginable that grief is sometimes, the unexpected, the unimaginable, when it's so easy to pick up a drink.
Exactly.
Right? And
exactly. We get primed for that with, here, honey, don't feel bad, have a cookie.
Yeah.
Which primes us because you'll feel better. And you do.
Yeah. Because cookies are good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Grandma did not know she was priming me for that drug dealer when I was 15. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
But if we look at what happened, what are the losses, it's much more of what I like to think of as a wellness model rather than a what's wrong with you model.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because what's wrong with me creates this helplessness.
Exactly.
This powerlessness.
Exactly.
Where there's nothing wrong with you. Grief is so normal.
Yeah.
Grief should be so normal.
Exactly. But look at what has happened to you. I will also totally plug Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey did a book just a few years ago called What Happened to You, which is really a beautiful book. And so I have no affiliation, but it's on my
If
Audible.
Oprah wants to affiliate, feel free.
So we have so many other losses that, childhood abuse, exposure to domestic violence, okay, housing insecurity, homelessness.
Huge.
How about what happened recently in the fires in this area? Okay, displacement due to war, migration, disaster. Okay, incarceration, institutional. How about foster care? How about even adoption as well? Okay, in there. home transitions, you know. So then you look at loss of identity or role. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we can look at loss of, you know, professional identity. Okay. How many clinicians were, you know, doing Zoom appointments, you know, in you know, a spare bedroom or a bathroom, or, you know,
in the corner,
hiding exactly.
from the dogs. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. But, you know, there is, you know, look at retirement, you know.
Always a huge loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, look at military identity, okay? Or purpose. You know, so much of grief is about a lack of purpose or a lack of meaning. I have a whole list of all these signs and symptoms because, you know, Isabelle, I could talk about this for like 4 days, but the podcast will.
Grief nerd.
Yeah, I am.
I love it. So good.
But one of the signs of grief, one thing that happens with grievers is what I like to refer to as your give dam is busted. Okay, and what seemed to be important before doesn't really matter now. Yeah, you know, and then it's really hard to suffer fools. You know, it's really hard to tolerate people talking about chit chat when it's like, really? Don't you know that you know that my loved one isn't on the planet anymore? Don't you know that I just got raped and nobody is trusting and I don't trust anybody and I can't think straight. And the whole entire world, you know, we talk about, I'll refer to those stages. So the first stage that I don't like, which is denial, which is appropriate in you know, in substance abuse, right? There's denial. It's appropriate for the people who were interviewed who were terminally ill, which is where Elizabeth Kubler-Ross came up with these. Right. But I like to talk about surrealness instead of denial. The surrealness is about that the whole entire world looks completely different and the same all at the same time, and how bizarre and weird that is. Yeah. Yeah. That's and grievers beautiful. Who want to scream at people because we also we're also thinking about we have more hypersensitivity to seeking what we're missing. And so somebody who has lost a pregnancy, who's lost a baby, they will see every single damn pregnant person that there is out there. Yeah. Okay. They will see, you know, the man whose partner died. He will still see all these couples that he assumes are very happy. Okay. Yeah. So we will seek out what it is that we're missing.
You know what I find so fascinating about grief and what really caught my interest is how alike it is to trauma and trauma responses. Because it is a trauma in itself, right? I always say grief, trauma, best friends. Can't have one without the other.
And grief is tangled with trauma. So and much, we have really, really, really great trauma trainings and you know, ways to deal with trauma. And I always say, yes, and grief is always tangled with that. Yeah. And so don't ignore or think, okay, we've gotten them through the trauma. Exactly. And the assumption is, well, it just takes time and you'll be able to get through this. Like, let's go dig deeper and be able to help people, what I like to think of as do some internal repair of all the ways the relationship was unfinished.
And all the secondary losses, what you described, right? That ripple effect of I've unfinished business in my relationship, and now I have unfinished business everywhere. Exactly, right? That's right. It's now my worldview is completely changed,
right? And that we're not the same person.
No,
after significant events.
Despite us trying our damnest to be the same person.
Exactly. Well, we're also told, you know, that you have to be the same person. We're told, you know, even, you know, the mom who, you know, is told, oh, you know what? You look like you're better. interprets that as oh, we're just going to ignore, you must be all better and over the death of your daughter. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, and this internal automatic protest that comes up of, I'm not better. Do you not see all my pain that's underneath? Yeah. That's underneath the water? Yeah. Yeah.
And we're trained almost to not see somebody's pain. It's not
right.
I always say those responses that we talked about in the beginning, I love what you said. They are coming from a good place. They're trying to comfort someone. Right. And sometimes we take comfort and we spin it into, let's help you mask it.
Exactly.
Right? Let's just help you put a smile on your face and then you'll be fine. It's all okay. Take a deep breath.
Because I don't want you to feel bad.
Yes.
Because really, it makes me feel bad.
It makes me uncomfortable.
Right. And I don't want to feel uncomfortable because I've learned over and over and over again from the time I was really, really little.
Exactly.
That that's not okay. That we have to do something about that.
Right.
Yeah. And instead of witness it and see it and sit next to it.
Sit next to it. And, that's the way that's the only way we can grieve is to feel it, move through it, move with it. Right. Not around it, over it, try to jump over it. Yeah, we have to acknowledge it. Yeah. But, I agree. We get these adverse messages of don't acknowledge it, don't feel it.
Right.
It's too painful.
Right. And we have to do something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wipe that shit out. Yeah. And grief is messy.
So messy.
And grieving and healing is disruptive also. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, when people are when their grief looks different, and to be able to talk to them about how does your grief look different now than it did before. Mm-hmm. One person was able to describe, it was like, my grief isn't as vicious as it used to be.
It's a great description.
Wow, yeah.
It's like a little monster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he's learned, we learn to adapt, but we also learn to be able to get through the grief tsunamis that come up. Mm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes grief is so silent, right? Sometimes it just creeps up on you. And
exactly. At any given time.
Right. Or sometimes it's really loud. It's screaming in the backyard. Mm-hmm. It's lashing out at people. Mm-hmm. It's pushing everyone away.
Yeah.
Where sometimes it could be like a faked smile.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Looks so different.
Yeah.
Well, what's coming up for me also while you were talking is community losses. Mm-hmm. Right? Especially right now, I think, where we're all kind of torn apart in the world.
Absolutely.
And you brought up the fires recently in the Palisades. There's community losses.
Yeah.
Where trauma doesn't have to be firsthand. Grief doesn't have to be firsthand. It could happen to my group, my community, my family system, my sibling, my friend. And I can experience those tsunamis of grief, even though it wasn't me.
Right. And, I remember, especially during the pandemic, people saying, oh, we're all grieving the same losses. I'm like, no, we're not. We're all grieving, but for different reasons. And there's so many different factors of and meanings of our losses and meaning of our grief.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how do we, and creating connections that are safe, that are respectful, okay, that we can have a different opinion, and how can we be respectful of each other and not have to be right.
Or not say, my way to grieve is the way.
Right.
And nobody else is grieving but me.
That's right.
Where that could be really isolating too.
You know what? Actually, that's a really, really great point that you bring up, because in families, I'll have families that will contact us and say, hi, we'd all like to come in. We'd all like to grieve together. It's a long stare at the camera there. And I say, okay, you know what? I'll say, why don't you come on in? And just so you know, is that, I'd be happy to meet with all of you who want to come in the room. Okay.
Exactly.
No, this is not an intervention. Okay. And then, we'll talk about, what happened. How did each person, find out about the loss? Is usually death related, and who's worried about who. But then I will also talk about here's what inadvertently happens is that families start distancing themselves from each other because they just don't want to hurt the other person. Yeah. And so they just, are like, you know what, I don't want to upset mom. So, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to go there. And mom is so terrified because it's like, you know what, they're not talking about dad. And I just want them to talk about their feelings. I want them to talk to me about it. But it's like, but they don't have the same mom anymore. Okay. They don't have the same parents because that parent is grieving their own loss. Okay. And it hurts, damn it. And, in our systems, it's built in, it's painful. Let's not go there. Let's avoid. Yeah. So it's really, and just being able to tolerate the other person's pain, especially, I think this is where sometimes unconscious contests can arise in families of who got loved the most, who didn't get recognized. Oh Lord, all the going through the stuff of what stuff means what to which person. Okay, I had a family that mom was an artist. Mom had died, and dad and the kids would come in, and then they were able to come in separately as well to have the kids do their own work, and then have different times that the whole family would come together. And dad had moved this table that mom had her artwork on. And for one kid, it was like, okay. Another kid was, oh my God, what? But mom wouldn't have liked that. And where did you put that? And why isn't that there? Okay.
Right.
And to be able to talk through that, because everybody grieves differently. And so then there's this also of, well, they're not crying as much, so I don't think that they really are grieving. It's like the people who are not crying kind of get the short end of the stick, because the assumption is they're not sad, or they're over it, or they're okay, or oh my gosh, what the hell are they bottling up?
Their emotions aren't as loud.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so there's all these different, loyalty to the person that's not there, loyalty to the people in the family. But it's so difficult for families to be able to support each other in their grief. And one of the, so many ways that we can help them is being able to teach them that, to just recognize that you're all going to have different reactions, and offer them different ways for their grief to be processed and heard. Yeah. So that they can come together. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so much sense. It's, how do I hold space for someone when I'm in so much pain?
Exactly.
And I can see someone else is in so much pain, but their pain looks different. That's always the toughest part in any relationship. Yeah. In any family system, any group. Right? Exactly. And a beautiful skill to learn over time. Yeah. Of like, how do I continue to hold space? Yeah. Even if their pain is so different and looks different and emotions are so different. Right. Yeah. Huge point.
But it's that comparison, well, it's not as bad as. Right. Or comments that are meant to be helpful that land of, oh, I know exactly how you feel. I had a pet die to a mom who lost their son. Yeah. And it's like, no, we don't want to negate the impact or the meaning for each person, but they may not be able to grieve together. Right.
Yeah. How do we seek connection rather than push each other away?
Yeah.
Right. And make it, I love how you said contests, right? There's these unconscious contests of my pain's bigger, or, you know, when you sit there and you think, doesn't everyone know how much like pain I'm in right now? And why is nobody asking about it? And does nobody care about me?
Exactly.
Right. That can really isolate.
Right. Which is how the world looks completely different. Like everybody's just moving on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or it looks like that.
And I'm stuck here in my pain.
Right.
Right. And I can't see a way out, which is also really hard for humans.
Yeah.
You know, one of the most surprising things when I started working as a clinician was, why does everyone want to plan so much? Why does everyone want to like have their life figured out right now? Right. And it's when grief comes and it's unexpected and it can just throw a wrench in, you know, a retirement plan, a life plan, a relationship plan, a family plan, right? And it's now there's this loss underneath it all of my life looks so different and now I don't have that future.
And I don't even know who I am, right? You know, that loss of our own identity. Yeah.
Who am I without someone?
Yeah.
Yeah. Without a pet even.
Yeah.
Right? Pets get forgotten a lot. Yeah.
But I think, you know, community, you know, and you guys do this really, really well, Ventana. I know that from over the years is that you attend to and see the pain that's underneath the addiction. Yeah. Yeah. And help people be able to get their footing back again.
Yeah.
That's what I love about, that's what I still love about doing this work. You know, is I will often say, you know, I'm going to hold the hope for you. Is that you don't have to have hope. That's okay. I'm going to have it for you because I've been doing this for a gazillion years. And I get to see people get their feet back on the ground. We have no earthly idea what that looks like. But I have a lot of faith in that. And I share that because I've had so many grievers over the years who have come back and said, you know, remember when you said that you were going to hold hope? I realized I so needed to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a client recently reach back out because I only get them for 30 days. I only get them for a short amount of time.
Right. So, you get them in the horror of the story.
Exactly. Right. And so I often can see they're going to be okay before they can see they're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I had someone recently reach out and go, I didn't believe you until I was okay.
Woo!
Until I was stable.
Yeah.
Right. Until, you know, I was stopped being in the chaos, in the fire. And I was like, see, I don't lie to people.
That's right. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And it was such, you know, a heartwarming moment of glimmer in darkness, which grief tends to put this darkness over every moment in your life, over work, over social, over romantic, over your family, like every single area of functioning, there tends to be this dark cloud that gets put on. Yeah. And it's having, you know, someone try to see, even if they can't in the moment, try to see glimmer, try to see hope, try to see some light.
Yes,
right, when it's so dark.
And I think the irony is that when we help them, when we help acknowledge and show them that we see the dark, that we see and hear, you know, the pain, is that's when that light comes in.
Exactly.
You know?
Connection.
Yeah.
Right? It all circles back to some kind of connection. Yeah. Is that what you found?
Connection is healing.
Yeah.
Connection is, yeah, you know, connection, community. You know, community can be, you know, 2 people. Community can be 100 people. But, you know, that connection is what we need. Yeah.
Earlier you said fear is one of the driving emotions and grief. And I wanted to circle back to it because I think it's so powerful. Well, do you want to start by like maybe saying a little bit more. Because fear is this big word, right?
Right.
It's like a uber powerful emotion.
Right.
Undefined.
I think that there's so many, I'll go over to defining grief. Grief is not just fear. Okay. It's, it is fear of what's going to happen. How am I going to get through this? What's going to happen to me? But it's also the sadness. It can also be the rage. It can also be, I want to hold on to the rage because I think that protects me. And that's not even conscious. Look at unpredictability. Okay. Is that, one of our main survivor, components of our brains is wanting to predict what's going to happen. And when we can't, then that is what provokes that terror, that fear, or it can be, can provoke being paralyzed, or checking out in different ways. I think that there can also be relief. And I've sat with many people who feel bad that they don't feel bad. Okay. Or that they feel relieved that they know where their dad is now. And that they don't have to keep worrying that they're going to get a call in the middle of the night because he's died. Okay. Or because he is in treatment, and thank God he's in treatment and it's really horrible, but there's a lot of grief in that. Okay. Yeah. There's grief in, there's a whole lot of conflicted feelings in recovery, right? Is that, getting sober is a loss, is a whole conglomeration of losses.
Absolutely.
It's a loss of a community. It's a loss of a lifestyle. It's a loss of habits. Okay? And I think that I think that it's important to honor that as well, that we can honor that loss and acknowledge it, and also hold the wow, and I'm proud of myself too.
Yes.
Okay? But it doesn't have to be a counterbalance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's definitely something a lot of people struggle with. And, that loss of that disenfranchised grief, right? That loss of a drug, whereas I'm supposed to be celebrating that I'm not using anymore. Yes, celebrate.
Right.
And right? It's an and, not a but.
Exactly.
Exactly. Right? It's we talk about it with toxic relationships too. It's when I have it's not through death, but if maybe, me and my friend are no longer close anymore, we're no longer serving each other anymore, I can be sad, and I can also acknowledge maybe this is for the best, right? How do I hold dialectical views with grief? Right. That it doesn't have to be this one way or the other way.
How can we, I think that we can help them with acknowledging, here, let's look at the whole relationship. What I like to think of as the good, the bad, the ugly, and the lovely. Okay? Because every relationship has some part of that. Some relationships have a really big parade. Some relationships have a little parade. Okay. Some have a lot of guilt. Some have a lot of resentment. But we have components in each of those areas, and being able to help people identify what would they want to have said. Even in estrangement, of helping people. This is the writing, is being able to write out that they do not send. That they do not send, okay? Because the purpose of that kind of writing is, here, let's help you get what I like to think of as the voltage. Let's reduce a lot of the voltage so that you can actually have a different conversation with them.
Exactly.
Okay? But we are having conversations with people who aren't in the room a lot. a lot, and they're circular conversations. Okay, and so we want to be able to help them with identifying, kind of internally repairing the pain, even the pain of not acknowledging the good stuff. Okay, but but it shouldn't be. Here, you need to identify the good stuff in order to counterbalance the bad shit, because that doesn't work, right?
No.
Yeah.
And I always think about, people who've maybe like lost a parent who is abusive or a sibling, and they thought when that person passed that their emotions would magically disappear. Yeah. Or that they wouldn't be sad about the loss. I've also heard that where it's like, whoa, right? We can have all of these expectations and grief.
Or there's relief initially. And then there's all these other feelings that come up from, oh, I can't text them, or I was going to tell them this, or there was a graduation and they weren't there to be there. Yeah. Yeah.
Or I can't pick up the phone and scream at them anymore.
Exactly.
Right? I can't be angry at them anymore.
Right.
Or I feel guilty that I'm angry at this person.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a huge one too.
Yeah.
Where we want to like normalize and acknowledge all of the emotions. I always say it's one of the fun things about being human. We get to feel all of these complex things all at the same time and go on this roller coaster.
Damn. Yeah.
Right? And everyone always looks at me like, Isabelle, that's bullshit. I'm like, well, you're here now.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's definitely true in grief, right? It's one moment I can feel this way. The next moment it's like happy, angry, joy, sad.
I love, and you guys know him, is Jay Westbrook. Jay Westbrook actually is a person who introduced me to grief. I was involved with the Grief Recovery Institute for, oh my gosh, almost 20 years. Later on in doing trainings throughout the country. But I love that Jay introduced me to John. But I love Jay will describe his own grief after the death of his wife. Nancy, he will say, I'm okay, and then I'm in a fetal position underneath the table, and then I'm okay, and then I'm in a fetal position, and then I'm okay, and look at the dual process model of grief. We go back and forth between being focused on the pain of the grief, and then our system has to take a break. And so, there's this restorative, look at it, restorative activities. And sometimes that's, I got to go to work. I got to go throw myself into this because we can't hold the grief. Sometimes people will say, I never got a chance to actually really grieve, as if you could come in and compact all of your grief within a short period of time. And okay, I'm just going to focus on my grief. Guess what? Your system won't let you do that. You got to have those breaks away.
Our survival system gets triggered.
Right.
And when you're in survival mode, you can't do the grief work. Right. It's I have to learn how to regulate my system. I have to learn how to rebalance. Right. And then I can go in and do writing, right? Or do those unsent letters.
Even with the writing that we do at our office, is we have people do it in session. I do not give it to them for homework. Nobody will do it for homework. Or they'll say, I forgot it. Or, oh, yeah, you know what? Can we talk about something else? Of course you're not in the mood to do this shit. But it's like, you know what? How about we get Dad out for 20 minutes? Okay? We got this map. We got, some other stuff that we have you do some writing. How about we just do this for a short period of time, and then we can put them away? I will metaphorically, when people come into the office, I'll say, okay, so, guess what I'm going to do with this piece of paper? Is this piece of paper, is I'm going to put it in your file, and we're going to lock this person in the filing cabinet for the week. And then we'll metaphorically take them out.
Yeah.
Now, do they always have a relationship with that person? Of course they do. Okay. But to be able to help that containment,
Yeah.
Those containers that we talk about in trauma work, doing the container. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't bring grief into your bedroom. Don't bring trauma into your bedroom. Don't write unsent letters in your bed.
Right.
Right.
And we can help them with, how people carry grief.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love somatic tools with grief, right? Movement, bodily sensations.
Right. If you look at all of, actually, I have not read it yet. I have it on my Kindle. I have an entire bookcase of nothing but grief books in my office.
Of course.
That doesn't include all the stuff on my Kindle or all the books that I've lent out over the years. But Mary Frances O'Connor wrote The Grieving Brain. Now, it's
a good book.
Isn't it a great book?
I'm halfway through it.
Oh, good. She wrote another book. I know. One more thing you have to get, Isabelle. It's called The Grieving Body.
Oh,
really? Which is grief is physical.
Oh, yeah.
We need to acknowledge grief is exhausting. It's exhausting, and it takes up an enormous amount of energy, far more than we think that it does. I will say I was taking care of my dad. He was in hospice, and they had a gym right next to the hospital. So I was a runner at the time, so I went down to run on the treadmill. I'm not kidding you, Isabelle. I fell asleep while walking on the treadmill.
Ouch.
I caught myself quickly.
Oh, good.
I thought, okay, I'm okay. So I just walked a little slower, fell asleep, and went, okay. I think I need to get off this before I kill myself. But I still remember that. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was 21 years ago. I was doing grief work for a long time, and it still astounded me of, oh my God, wow, I had no idea I was that exhausted.
Emotional exhaustion is a different type of beast.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's all encompassing.
So all the somatic work is really important.
Yeah. And movement. Yeah. Right? Some type of movement, which is maybe what you were trying to do.
Which is also, moving the energy.
Exactly.
Okay? We have to move the energy, emotionally. We have to move the energy physically.
Yeah. And release it, right? Yeah. It's finding those releases.
Yeah.
Where it sometimes could be throwing ice or throwing punches or screaming into the open air, screaming into a pillow. Screaming at a person if they are willing to take that.
Yes.
Right? But that energy release outside of our body is so important. And that's what we always stress, right? Yeah. When we don't release this energy, this tension, it lives, right? Body keeps the score, right? Teaches us over and over and over again of, that fatigue and that tensions points. And all of a sudden my neck is so tight. And I'm like, well, have we been thinking about some things today, right?
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Of doing, I always encourage body scans multiple times a day, right? Check in because sometimes it comes up in my body.
Exactly.
And it's my brain's not catching up. Exactly. Right? My brain processes are focused on other things. Yeah. So I have to intentionally go through everywhere in my body and go, ooh, like what's coming up? Yeah. Right? And I talk about in one of my groups about Laura Berman and her grief story. And she took this very somatic way of grieving her son's death. Yeah. And I loved her example and of, she created this grief corner, right? And it's something that everyone I hope should have in their house.
Right.
Where it's
this is acknowledgement of I can go grieve there.
I can take what I love 20 minutes, 10 minutes.
Yeah. And
feel,
connect with them.
Connect. Right. Release, move, whatever you need to do. And then I can continue on with my day, where grief doesn't have to be disruptive, but we just have to find this balance, right? With how do I acknowledge, how do I feel, how do I release, and still recognize life is going on.
Exactly.
Right? Exactly. Which is the toughest part.
Right.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
This is good talking with you today.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It was good. I'm learning so much, too.
Oh, I learned from
I'm
you,
stealing
too.
Surrealism.
Awesome.
Surrealist.
Please do. Please do. Because that really is, I am a really, really big proponent of, let's talk about the surrealness rather than the denial. Yeah. And those stages of grief is like what everyone comes in with, right? It's, I know grief. It's I'm supposed to do these things. And I'm like, it's not that. It's so individual. There's no roadmap. There's no timeline. There's no magic. But we want a timeline.
Exactly.
Because we want this. One of the questions we always get is, how long is this going to go on?
How many sessions do I have to do?
Right. Yeah.
How long do I have to talk about this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because again, it's painful. And I think when we're in pain, it feels a lot longer.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Time, the way that our brain processes time is very different in our reptilian part of our brain versus in the neocortex. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining Beyond the Window. We are so lucky, and it feels like such a privilege and honor to get to talk to you and pick your brain. And
thank you.
I hope everyone goes and checks out Calabasas Grief and Counseling Center.
Thank you. And it is an honor being here. I really, I love the work that you guys do here. And I'm a big supporter of you.
Oh,
yeah, I'm a big supporter of you, Isabelle. It's so lovely. It's such an honor to see you grow over the last couple of years, too. Yeah, and I'm so excited. I'm like, Isabelle's doing a grief group. Awesome.
Every week.
Yep. Awesome.
It's my favorite time. That's so amazing. Thank you so much for that.
Okay.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you.
Visit www.calabasascounseling.com for more information and to connect with Debi Jenkins Frankle. Thanks for listening to Beyond the Window. Subscribe to never miss a conversation and share this with someone who might need it. We'll see you next time.